Hello again all! Welcome back to the Knowledge Tower, where we investigate the science behind the Bionicle legend. In today's investigation, we are going to be taking a closer look at the dreaded Visorak Horde, vicious spider-like Rahi that form both a key part of the armies of the Brotherhood of Makuta and act as the main antagonistic force during the 2005 story arc. During that arc, the defeated and trapped Makuta Pterodax telepathically summons the spiders to Metru Nui alongside Sidorak and Rudaka, king and viceroy of the Horde respectively. They are then tasked with guarding the sleeping Matoran to keep them out of the hands of the returning Toa Metru, while Rudaka works on a plan to trick the Toa into freeing Pterodax from his confinement. The Toa Metru greatly underestimate this new threat and are quickly captured and mutated into the bestial Toa Hordika, spending the remaining story arc fighting not only the Visorak, but their ever-growing Rahi sides. The books and movie of this year depict the Toa being vastly outnumbered, having to resort to guerrilla hit-and-run tactics in order to avoid being recaptured by the Visorak while they attempt to rescue the sleeping Matoran. But ever since seeing Web of Shadows on DVD back in 2005, one thing that I always wanted to know the answer to was just how dire their situation was. Yes, the Toa Hordika were outnumbered, but by how much? Just how many Visorak were there in the Horde? In this video, we find out. As my first attempt to answer this question, I turned to the dictionary definition of Horde to see if I could get a size range there. Definitions can differ depending on context, with some usages of the word simply meaning a large group of people, though often this is only used in a derogatory way towards said group, to differentiate it from usage of the more neutral word of crowd. Another definition specified that a horde referred to an army or large group of fighters that tries to attack or invade a place by force. This one definitely fits with the Visorak, but it still only gives us a size range of large, which isn't particularly helpful. A definition-based method wasn't going to cut it. I needed to try something else. What I really needed was an instance within the story in which the whole horde was gathered together that I could base my estimations on. However, these are in short supply, given that the Visorak had already established themselves across the whole city by the time we first meet them. Also, for the vast majority of the time after this introduction, the Horde is spread far and wide trying to recapture the Toa after they are rescued by the Rahaga, further compounding the problem. There is one instance that springs to mind though, and it occurs after Vakama defects to the side of the Horde during the events of Bionicle 3, Web of Shadows. After Rudaka convinces Sidorak to make Vakama the master of the Visorak, he takes Vakama out to the Colosseum arena to make the announcement, with Vakama being left in shock and awe at the assembled might of the Horde. The scene from the movie depicts the entire floor of the arena being packed with Visorak, with them taking up every available space on the Akalini field. The lines said by Sidorak here suggest that the full army has gathered in this moment, with him stating, "Behold, the Visorak Horde!" Though interestingly, the line is changed to "Meet the troops" in the novelization. Both lines still suggest that this is the Horde fully assembled, however, as does the context of the scene. Given that Sidorak is introducing Vakama as the new commander of the army, it makes sense if the vast majority, if not all, of the Visorak were present to receive the news. Even if it is not the full might of the Horde, however, analysing this scene will still give us a baseline number for the minimum size of what the Horde could be. In order to use this scene as a way of estimating the size of the Horde, we need to know two things. 1. The total area the Akalini field takes up, and 2. The area of that floor that is taken up by each individual Visorak. If we know both of those factors, it will simply be a matter of dividing the former by the latter in order to get the total number of Visorak. Nice and easy. Easier still, in fact, because I have already done the hardest part of those calculations in a previous investigation on this channel. In my video for Bionicle Day 2024, I calculated both the height and floor space of Metru Nui's Colosseum. It's a video I'm quite proud of. I've linked it in the card above if you want to check it out. As part of the floor space calculations, I found that the area taken up by the Aquilini field itself was around 153,272 square meters. For context, that's around 73 American football fields, or around 38 real football fields. With that measure already sorted, next we need the space taken up by the average Visorak. Luckily for me, the Visorak are a set wave that I not only own in its entirety, but also one that I haven't stripped down for parts. I needed to make the measurements for all 6 of the sets, as they have slight variations in leg and mandible pieces that will need to be accounted for. Once that was done, I could use the set-to-story conversion factors previously determined on this channel in order to find out what those measurements equated to within the story itself. I'd also like to note here that I made the decision to only take measurements of the 6 standard Visorak breeds, ignoring the Kagarak, Venom Flyers and Gate Guardians that were also members of the Horde. The Kagarak can vary in size quite dramatically from being slightly larger than a standard Visorak all the way up to a monster that a titan like Rudaka can use as a steed, so I cut them from the calculations due to their inherent complexity. This shouldn't be too much of a problem though, as the story suggests that the Kagarak are relatively rare compared to the 6 main Visorak breeds, with the Gate Guardians and Venom Flyers likely being even rarer, so it shouldn't affect the final results too much. In order to make my measurements, I set up each of my 6 Visorak sets in a standing pose that looked natural and matched neutral poses we see them in during the movie. Next, I measured their lengths and widths to find the footprint each one took up. On average, the Visorak sets measured 13 cm wide by 22 cm long, giving them a footprint area of 286 square centimeters. To get the in-story equivalent measure, I multiplied the length and width measures by 10.95, which was previously calculated in the Mass of a Toa video to be the conversion factor needed for set-to-story calculations in the Metru Nui era set scale. That increased the measures to around 1.4 by 2.4 meters, giving a resulting footprint area of 3.4 square meters. I decided to round that up to 3.5 square meters, just to give each individual Visorak a little more personal space, given that we see in the movie that they seem to snap at each other if they get too close. Now that we have both of these measures, it's simply a matter of dividing the floor area by that of an individual Visorak, and we will get our answer. Plugging those numbers into a calculator and rounding to the nearest whole number, we get a grand total of 43,792 Visorak. That is a lot of spiders. I started this wondering just how outnumbered the Toa Hordika were by the Horde, and it turns out that they were almost unimaginably overwhelmed. 7,298 to 1. No wonder they had to resort to hit-and-run tactics during the Great Rescue. There really was no other strategy that they could use against such numbers. Numbers which, remember, were even worse during their final battle at the Colosseum, which were actually 10,948 to 1, given that Matau and Vakama were off fighting each other instead of the Horde at the time. If you do add in the Kagarak, Venom Flyers and Gate Guardians that I omitted before, then it wouldn't surprise me if that number gets pushed up to around 45,000 in total. Definitely a force to be reckoned with by an army of Toa, never mind just 6. As an extra calculation, I also checked how many Visorak per square kilometre this would equate to in the city. As another part of my Colosseum video, I determined that the land area of Metru Nui was around 911.42 square kilometres. This means that there was an average of 48 Visorak per square kilometre in the city. That's quite the infestation. These kinds of numbers also really make you appreciate the changes made in the novelization of Web of Shadows compared to the film. Rather than apparently trying to take on the entire Horde like the movie leads you to believe, the novel instead depicts the Toa's plan in the final battle as to quickly make their way to the Matoran spheres through the corridors of the Colosseum and to avoid a fight wherever possible. I don't know about you, but the novel's plan certainly seems less insane than the movie's does when you consider these numbers. As a final part of these calculations, I decided to try and use this shot from the movie to make an estimate on what the distribution was between the 6 Visorak breeds. This ultimately proved to be impractical, however, as the shot only showed a partial view of the Colosseum floor for the most part, and a lot of the Visorak were shrouded in mist that obscures their coloration, making counting how many of one breed versus another quite difficult. Instead, I decided to look again at the novel's version of the scene to see if that could help. And that's when I noticed it. The line that makes this entire investigation moot. Where 5 Toa had scoffed at him, 1,000 Visorak were now ready to fight at his command. 1,000. There are 1,000 Visorak in the Horde that invaded Metru Nui. It was there the whole time, and I didn't spot it. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It really pays to double check the source material thoroughly before starting these investigations. But does this really mean I've wasted all your time here? I like to think not. 1,000 is a nice, big, round number that comes up a lot in Bionicle. 1,000 years of the Dark Time, 1,000 Matoran being the original figure given for the population of Metru Nui, etc. It's a number that Greg likes to use. But, like with the population of the city that later got retconned into being in the multiple thousands instead of just 1, I think it's a number that doesn't always hold up to scrutiny. 1,000 Visorak is still a mighty force to pit against 6 Toa, sure, but as a figure for the whole Horde? As a main wing of the Brotherhood of Makuta's army that could invade a universe? As a number that needs to seem reasonable given shots like this in the movie? It seems a bit too small for me. But around 43 to 45,000 Visorak? Now that seems way more like it. But what do you think? Do you like the canon number given in the books? Or do you prefer my calculated figure for the size of the Horde? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I hope I will see you again soon for another Bionicle Science investigation here at the Knowledge Tower.